Welcome back to the Anatomy of a Riflescope series, where we've been discussing everything you need to know about how a riflescope works and what each of these parts do. So far we've run through the body tube, which kind of holds everything together. We've broken some misconceptions about lenses and spoken about why lenses are so important. And we've started going through the riflescope from front to back, with the objective lens assembly being the previous episode. Now we're shifting one place back once again, and in this one we're going to be running through the parallax mechanism and what that actually does. We'll be talking about what parallax error is, we're going to be talking about how it affects you as a shooter, and we're going to be running through how we correct for parallax error on a riflescope. Let's get straight to it. Firstly, let's define parallax error. Parallax error occurs when your reticle, which you use to aim and to measure, is not situated perfectly in the same focal plane as the image that's being projected onto it by your objective lens. We've all experienced parallax error at some point, let's say when trying to measure something with a ruler. If your ruler is flat against the object that you're trying to measure, then you can change your perspective and you're still going to get the same measurement. However, if you raise the ruler off the surface of whatever you're trying to measure, and then you change your perspective, you'll see that you can't get a precise measurement anymore. You need to think of the reticle in your riflescope like that ruler. Generally speaking, when you receive a new riflescope, one of the first things you'll do is you'll actually adjust the reticle focus to your eye using the diopter right at the back of your scope, but that doesn't solve the issue of the image that the objective lens is trying to focus on the front focal plane. We need a way to adjust that focus, and that's where your parallax dial comes in. The first way to correct for this, and the easiest way, is to have an adjustable objective lens that can shift forward and backwards. You may have seen the term adjustable objective, and basically all that is a like a knurled dowel on the front of your objective that you can turn forward and backwards, that shifts the entire objective assembly and changes the distance between the objective and where your reticle is. The main downside to this is that it's inconvenient. If you have to reach forward all the time, it changes the way that you actually situated behind your rifle. So this is generally reserved for disciplines like F-class or bench rest, where you're shooting at one distance all the time, where you set your objective once and then you leave it. It's also used sometimes in small body tube diameter riflescopes, like 1-inch tube riflescopes, just because there isn't a lot of space in those small tubes for a parallax cell like the one we're going to look at here in a moment. So that's one way of doing it, adjustable objective. And the other benefit is, of course, that you don't need this entire mechanism. So there's fewer things that can go wrong mechanically, there's fewer parts that need to be made, and there's fewer lenses that the light has to travel through and be bent by. So your optical performance is generally very good as well. Another benefit that people may not think of is that an adjustable objective riflescope gives you a larger circumference to mark and a larger circumference to turn, so that you can actually fine-tune your focus much easier than you can on most side focus mechanisms. This is great for, let's say, a very high magnification riflescope like a bench rest scope, where you need to zoom in really tight and you need to really fine-tune your focus. The other way of doing this is obviously the side parallax, which is what we have here on this 5-25 Titan in front of me. This is the most common way of doing it nowadays, and the way this works is that you have a parallax cell like the one you see in front of me here, which is essentially a lens that changes the focal point of the image coming in from the objective lens so that it can be aligned with your reticle. And this is controlled by a knob generally on the left hand side of the riflescope, which has a disc called a helix attached to it, which essentially has a milled spiral on it, and this milled spiral provides a slot for a pin that's connected to the objective cell to ride inside. So as you turn that focus knob, it actually shifts your entire parallax cell forward and backwards. The benefit of a side parallax mechanism is obvious. It's way more convenient, it's easier to reach from your shooting position. However, there are some drawbacks. The first is obviously that there's more components, so it can be more expensive to produce. The second is that there's another lens, so optically the performance may not be quite as good, and there's just more that can go wrong with more components. So the tolerances in the parts that have to be made are extremely important. If they're made too large or too small, there can be serious repercussions. When the parallax cell is adjusted forwards and backwards, it has to be guarded with the body tube essentially being the guard for the parallax cell. So the fitment between the parallax cell and the body tube has to be very precise. If it's too loose, it can actually twist slightly skew, and if it's twisted slightly skew, it can change the way that the image from the objective is projected onto your reticle, which can result in a point of impact shift. If it's too tight, then you can be trying to force your parallax adjustment, and you can, let's say, bend this pin over here, and everything becomes really stiff and can eventually break. When you torque down your mounts, it's critically important to use the correct torque, because it's possible to actually clamp your body tube right over here in front of the turret too tight and actually impinge this whole mechanism and stop it from working properly. So now you know, if your parallax feels extremely smooth, it may not be a good sign. It may mean that there's too much of a gap between the parallax cell and the body tube, and that's not always a good thing. And we wouldn't be covering this entire topic if we didn't discuss rifle scopes that don't have a parallax adjustment. Is this a deal breaker? Does every scope need a parallax adjustment? Great question. Well, on a high magnification rifle scope like this, it's a pretty critical component. You're not going to see anything unless you have a parallax adjustment. But on a LPVO, for example, like a 1:8, 1:6, 1:10, or on a low power hunting scope like our new Helix HD Compact 2:12 by 42, you generally have smaller objective lenses and low magnification, which means that everything is going to be in focus. Your depth of field is going to be much deeper, and you're not going to have the need to adjust your focus all the time. Another thing to consider is that with those rifle scopes, you're generally hunting or shooting targets that are much larger. It's not a high magnification bench rest scope where you're trying to go for tiny groups. Your targets are going to be a bit bigger, let's say a deer at 80 yards. So if there is a slight shift between your reticle and the image, it's not the end of the world. You're not even going to notice it for those use cases. I hope you found this video informative. In the next one, we're going to take one more step backwards and take a look at the erect tube, a component that is completely hidden but has so many important jobs within a rifle scope system. Thanks for watching.